The council chamber on Vex Prime Station stretched wide enough to hold representatives from 40 different species. Captain Daniel Carter stood at the speaker's platform with his hands clasped behind his back. Trying not to show his nervousness, his chief engineer, Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, stood beside him with a data tablet that held everything humanity wanted to share with the galaxy. They had traveled 3 months to reach this place, and now their future depended on the next hour. The Galactic Council sat in a massive circular arrangement above them, each species in their own section with translation devices floating near their heads. Admiral Krevos of the Zathran Empire dominated the center position, a reptilian figure nearly 3 meters tall with scales that gleamed like polished brass. Under the station's lights, his eyes, cold and amber-colored, fixed on Daniel with what looked like amusement. "Humans," Krevos said, his voice booming through the chamber's sound system. "You have requested advanced technology trade agreements." Daniel nodded and activated the holographic display. "Yes, Admiral, we believe Earth has reached a point where we can contribute to galactic commerce and defense." The hologram showed the USS Valiant, humanity's newest prototype warship. Daniel felt pride looking at it. 20 years of development. The best minds on Earth working together to create something that could stand among the stars. Amy stepped forward and began explaining the technical specifications. The Valiant uses particle accelerators for primary weapons, reinforced titanium alloy for hull armor, and a fusion reactor capable of— Laughter interrupted her. It started with a few scattered chuckles from the upper tiers, then spread like wildfire through the chamber. Ambassador Lyra Vex of the Confederation, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms, laughed so hard her translation device nearly fell from its position. "Particle accelerators?" she managed between laughs. "My people mounted those on cargo haulers 600 years ago." Krevos held up one clawed hand and the laughter died down. Those smirks remained on many faces. "Lieutenant Rodriguez," he said with false politeness, "your armor specifications. This titanium alloy, how thick is it?" Amy's jaw tightened, but she answered professionally. 40 centimeters at critical points. "Admiral." More laughter erupted. A delegate from the Corthan Assembly stood up, their crystalline body refracting the light. "Our mining drones have thicker plating than that." Krevos leaned forward in his seat, and Daniel saw something cruel in his expression. "Captain Carter, I must ask, did your species genuinely believe this vessel would impress us?" Daniel felt heat rising in his face, but kept his voice steady. "The Valiant represents humanity's best engineering." "It represents," Krevos interrupted, "exactly what we expected from a species that only discovered faster than light travel 30 years ago." The Admiral stood and walked down to the speaker's platform, his massive frame making Daniel feel small. "Let me be clear. Captain, your prototype took 20 years to develop, yes?" Daniel nodded. "My empire builds superior vessels in 8 months, vessels with weapons that could vaporize your Valiant before your sensors even detected the threat." Krevos circled around the hologram, studying it like a predator examining prey. "Your power core generates, what, 60 terawatts?" 75, Amy said quietly. 75. Krevos laughed again. "My personal shuttle generates more power than that." Ambassador Vex descended from her seat to join them. "Captain Carter, I don't mean to be unkind, but perhaps Earth should focus on what it does well. Agriculture, perhaps? Raw material exports? We have mineral-rich systems that need proper exploitation," added another delegate. Daniel clenched his fists at his sides. They weren't even considering humanity as equals. They saw Earth as a resource to be harvested, nothing more. Krevos returned to his seat, and the council began their formal vote one by one. Each species rejected Earth's petition for technology trade. Reasons varied, but the message stayed the same. Humanity wasn't ready, wasn't advanced enough, wasn't worthy when the vote finished 40 rejections. 0 approvals. Krevos delivered his final statement. Captain Carter, take this message back to your leaders. Earth should abandon these military fantasies and accept its role in the galactic economy as a supplier world. We will not. Daniel started. You will, Krevos said, his voice suddenly hard and threatening. Because the alternative is that someone teaches you your place by force. The chamber fell silent. Daniel met Krevos's eyes and saw the Admiral meant every word. This council is adjourned, Krevos announced, and the delegates began filing out. Many still chuckling about the primitive human warship. Daniel and Amy walked back to their shuttle in silence. The docking bay felt cold, despite the environmental controls once inside their small vessel. Amy slammed her tablet down on the console. They didn't even look at the adaptive systems, she said, her frustration finally breaking free. They saw the basic specs and decided we weren't worth their time. Daniel sat in the pilot's seat and stared out at the massive station. They're arrogant, he said quietly. They have reason to be. Did you see their technology displays? One of those dreadnoughts could probably destroy our entire defense fleet. Maybe, Daniel said. But something nagged at his mind. He pulled up the recording of their presentation and watched it. Again, the council had mocked their weapons, their armor, their power output, all the obvious specifications, but not once had anyone asked about the quantum jump drive knot. Once had they questioned the adaptive hull matrix. They had dismissed everything based on numbers alone, without curiosity about how those systems actually worked. Amy, he said slowly. They didn't ask about our innovations, they only compared raw output. So maybe they're not as smart as they think they are. Amy looked at him with concern. Daniel, we can't fight them, you heard Krevos. I'm not talking about fighting. I'm talking about not rolling over because they laughed at us. He opened the communication channel. Back to Earth Command. Admiral Patricia Hayes appeared on screen. Her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, her expression already knowing. They rejected us. Daniel reported. I saw the broadcast, Hayes said. The whole council session was transmitted across the galaxy. They wanted everyone to see humanity put in its place. Admiral, I request permission to run field tests on the Valiant full operational trials. Hayes studied him through the screen. You think we should show them what our prototype can really do? I think they judged us without all the information. Maybe it's time we provide a demonstration. A small smile crossed Hayes' face. Permission granted. Captain, take the Valiant out and show us what she can do. The transmission ended, and Amy stared at Daniel. You're serious about this? They think we're primitives with a toy ship, Daniel said, starting the shuttle's engines. Let's find out if they're right. The shuttle departed Vex Prime Station and jumped to faster-than-light speed, heading back toward human space. Neither of them knew that Krevos was already assembling Fleet 80 warships, including 5 dreadnoughts. The Admiral had decided that humanity's attempt to join the Council was an insult that required correction. His fleet would visit Earth's outer colonies. First, small settlements with minimal defenses would destroy them one by one until humanity learned to accept their Plaskrovos. Expected this to take a few weeks at most. What he didn't expect was that one prototype ship would be waiting for him. The USS Valiant moved through the asteroid field of the Ross system like a dancer, avoiding obstacles that would crush lesser ships. Captain Daniel Carter walked the corridors of his vessel, running his hand along the walls that hummed. With barely contained energy, the ship felt alive somehow, more than just metal and circuits. Every crew member he passed gave him a nod or a word of encouragement. They all knew what the Valiant represented. Humanity's gamble that innovation mattered more than raw power in the engineering section. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez stood before a massive display showing the ship's systems in real-time, colored Lines flowed across screens like rivers of light, each one representing a different system working in harmony. "How's she holding up?" Daniel asked. Amy turned and smiled, though exhaustion showed in her eyes. "Better than expected. Actually, the adaptive matrix is learning faster than our simulations predicted." She pulled up a diagnostic screen. "Watch this." Amy triggered a simulation of an incoming missile attack. The display showed the Valiant's hull responding instantly. The titanium alloy didn't just sit there waiting to be hit. Instead, it flowed like liquid metal, redistributing mass to create a thicker barrier exactly where the impact would occur. The hull anticipates the threat vector and reinforces itself in microseconds, Amy explained, pride evident in her voice. "How much punishment can it take?" "In theory, about 10 times what a standard warship of this size could handle, but we've never tested it against real weapons." Daniel nodded and continued his walk through the ship. In the tactical station, Commander Jack Bennett was running combat simulations with an intensity that made junior officers nervous. Jack had been a wildcard choice for tactical officer. His methods were unconventional, and his strategies often bordered on reckless, but he won every war game he entered, usually by doing something his opponents never expected. "Commander," Daniel said. Approaching the tactical display, Jack looked up and grinned. "Captain, I've been running scenarios against Zathran fleet formations, and they fight like they have all the time in the world. Their formations are designed to overwhelm through superior firepower, but they're predictable." Jack pulled up a 3-dimensional battle map. They put their dreadnoughts in the center, cruisers in the surrounding shell, fighters as an outer screen. It's textbook defensive positioning, which means they've never fought an opponent who could break through that shell. They rely on intimidation and raw power. Daniel studied the formation and saw what Jack meant. Every Zathran strategy assumed their enemy would attack head-on, trying to punch through superior shields and armor. "What if we don't attack their strength?" Daniel mused. "Exactly," Jack said, excitement building. "What if we use the Valiant's advantages: speed, adaptability, unpredictability?" In the medical bay, Dr. Lisa Morgan monitored the neural interface stations. The Valiant's most experimental system wasn't visible from the outside. It existed in the connection between crew and ship. 40 people had volunteered to have neural implants that would let them interface directly with the ship's AI. The technology was risky. Some test subjects had experienced severe headaches, and one had suffered temporary memory loss. But those who successfully bonded with the system reported an almost supernatural awareness of the ship's status. "How are the interface readings?" Daniel asked. Lisa looked up from her screens, concern on her face, within acceptable parameters. "But barely. The crew is pushing themselves hard." She showed him biometric data. "Every time we run a combat simulation, their neural activity spikes. The stress is cumulative." "Can they handle a real engagement?" Lisa hesitated before answering. "For a short battle, yes, but if we end up in a prolonged fight, we risk serious neural damage." Daniel felt the weight of that information. The Valiant's true power came from the crew's direct connection to its systems, but using that power had a cost. An alarm chimed through the ship. Daniel's communicator activated, and Jack's voice came through, urgent and tight. "Captain, to the bridge. We have an incoming priority message from Earth Command." Daniel ran through the corridors, reaching the bridge in under a minute. The main screen showed Admiral Hayes, but her usual calm demeanor was gone. Her face was pale and her jaw clenched. "Captain Carter, we have a situation. The Zathran Empire has attacked Epsilon Station." Daniel felt his blood turn cold. Epsilon was humanity's largest outer colony. 8,000 people lived there, mostly families of miners and researchers. Casualties? he asked, though he already feared the answer. All of them, Hayes said, her voice breaking slightly. Krevos broadcast the attack across every channel he wanted us to watch. The screen changed to show footage that made Daniel's stomach turn. Zathran warships surrounded the small station, their weapons firing in synchronized volleys. The station's shields lasted maybe 30 seconds before collapsing. What happened next was systematic destruction. The Zathran didn't just disable the station. They vaporized it section by section. The broadcast included audio of colonists screaming, begging for mercy that never came. Krevos is transmitting demands, Hayes continued, forcing herself to focus. Earth must surrender all territorial claims beyond the Sol system and accept vassal status under the Zathran Empire. And if we refuse? He has a fleet of 80 warships moving toward our colonies. He says he'll destroy one settlement every week until we comply. The bridge crew had gathered behind Daniel, all of them watching the screen with expressions of shock and rage. Amy's hands were shaking. Jack's jaw was clenched so tight Daniel could see muscles jumping in his neck. Admiral, Daniel said carefully, where's the Zathran fleet now? Hayes pulled up a star chart. Long range. Sensors put them here. They're moving through the Kalaris expanse toward the Titan colony. Daniel studied the map. The Kalaris expanse was a massive nebula that interfered with most scanning technology ships traveling through. It relied on pre-programmed routes because sensor range dropped to almost nothing. How long until they reached Titan? 14 hours. We're assembling every available ship to defend it. But we can't get there in time. Daniel looked at his crew, then back at Hayes. The Valiant can get there in 11 hours. Silence filled the bridge. Everyone understood what he was suggesting. One experimental prototype against 80 warships, including 5 dreadnoughts. The odds weren't just bad. They were impossible, Captain, Hayes said slowly. I can't order you to do this. It would be suicide. You're not ordering me. Admiral, I'm volunteering. Amy stepped forward. We all are, Jack nodded. This is exactly the kind of impossible situation humans are built for, one by one. Every crew member on the bridge affirmed their commitment. Hayes looked at them with something between pride and sorrow. If you're going to do this, you'll need every advantage. I'm authorizing unrestricted use of all experimental systems. Understood, Captain Carter, Hayes said, her voice thick with emotion. Make them regret underestimating us. The transmission ended. Daniel turned to face his crew, 40 people who knew they were probably flying to their deaths, but chose to go anyway. Amy, I want the adaptive matrix at maximum sensitivity. If a stray hydrogen atom hits our hull, I want the ship to know about it. Aye, Captain. Jack, start plotting attack vectors through the Kalaris expanse. Use the nebula's interference to our advantage. Already on it. Lisa, prepare the neural interface for combat operations and make sure you have medical teams standing by. Yes, sir. Daniel sat in the captain's chair and activated the ship-wide communication. All hands. This is the captain. You know what happened at Epsilon Station? His voice carried through every corridor of the Valiant. The Zathran Empire thinks they can bully humanity into submission. They think we're primitives with a toy ship. We're about to show them what happens when you underestimate human beings. Plot a course for the Kalaris expanse. Maximum speed. The Valiant's engines flared to life with power that made the whole ship vibrate. Stars stretched into lines as they jumped to faster than light speed. Behind them, Earth's orbital defenses scrambled to prepare for the worst. Ahead of them, Admiral Krevos continued his journey through the nebula, completely unaware that his fleet's destruction was racing toward him at impossible speed. The galaxy was about to learn that mocking humanity's prototype was the Zathran Empire's greatest mistake. The Kellar's expanse looked like a painting of purple and gold clouds stretching across thousands of kilometers. The USS Valiant drifted through the nebula with all non-essential systems powered down, making it nearly invisible to standard sensors, Captain. Daniel Carter stood on the bridge watching the sensor display that showed the approaching Zathran fleet like a swarm of angry insects, Sadie warships traveling in a formation that spoke of absolute confidence. They weren't even running defensive patterns. Krevos clearly didn't expect any resistance. Time to intercept? Daniel asked quietly. Commander Jack Bennett checked his console. The Vanguard will reach our position in 12 minutes, main fleet 15 minutes behind them. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez was routing power through systems in ways the designers never intended. The adaptive matrix is online and responding beautifully, she reported. Hull integrity is at 100%. And the quantum drive is charged for combat operations. Daniel activated the ship's AI, Atlas. Status report. The artificial intelligence responded in a calm voice that seemed almost human. All combat systems operational. Captain, I have analyzed Admiral Krevos's fleet composition and tactical doctrine. Recommendations? The Zathran rely on overwhelming firepower and superior numbers. They have never encountered an opponent who prioritizes adaptability over raw strength. Weak points? Their command structure is highly centralized. Removing key vessels will create confusion throughout the fleet. Jack grinned at that. So we cut off the head and watched the body thrash around. The first Zathran ships appeared on visual sensors, 12 heavy cruisers that formed the fleet's vanguard. Each one was massive, bristling with weapons and protected by shields that could withstand planetary bombardment against any conventional warship. They would be unstoppable, but Valiant wasn't conventional. Amy, deploy the probe network, Daniel ordered. She activated a system that launched dozens of small devices from hidden ports along the Valiant's hull to enemy sensors. They would look like debris fragments of metal and ice drifting through the nebula. In reality, each probe was a weapons platform controlled by Atlas. Jack scattered them throughout the surrounding space, creating a three-dimensional minefield that the Zathran sensors couldn't distinguish from natural phenomena. Network deployed, Amy confirmed. All probes responding and awaiting commands on the main screen. Admiral Krevos appeared in a broadcast directed toward Earth. His reptilian face filled the display with an expression of cruel satisfaction. Humans, he began, his voice dripping with contempt. You have witnessed what happens to those who defy the Zathran Empire. Epsilon Station was merely the first lesson. By this time tomorrow, Titan Colony will share its fate. He leaned closer to his camera, amber eyes gleaming. Then Mars Station, then Luna Base, then your precious Earth itself. We will dismantle your civilization piece by piece until you beg for the mercy of vassalage. The broadcast ended. Daniel's hands gripped his chair's armrests so hard his knuckles turned white. The bridge crew watched him, waiting for orders that would likely be their last. All hands. Battle stations, he said quietly. Alarms chimed through the ship crew. Members strapped into their neural interface stations. Dr. Lisa Morgan monitored their vital signs, watching brain activity spike as they connected with the ship's systems. Neural connections established, she reported. All personnel within safe parameters. Jack, you have tactical control. Show them what happens when they underestimate us. Jack's fingers flew across his console. Atlas, execute. Attack pattern Delta 7 target the Vanguard command. Ships. The Valiant came alive. Its engines flared for minimal power to full combat thrust in less than a second. Ship dropped its stealth posture and appeared on every Zathran sensor like a ghost materializing. From nothing, the response was immediate. 12 Zathran cruisers turned to face this single small vessel that dared challenge Then their weapons charged. Shield capacitors routed to maximum, and targeting systems locked on. What happened next would be analyzed by military strategists across the galaxy for generations. The Valiant fired its particle accelerators, but not in the way anyone expected. Instead of trying to punch through the Zathran shields with brute force, the weapons created harmonic resonance patterns. Atlas had calculated the exact frequencies that would make the enemy shields vibrate against themselves. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. 6 Zathran cruisers saw their shields collapse inward, the energy meant to protect them turning into a crushing force. Their hulls buckled under the pressure. 2 ships exploded outright. 4 more went dark, their systems overloaded and crew likely dead or dying. The remaining 6 cruisers returned fire with everything they had. Hundreds of missiles and energy beams converged on the Valiant's position. Any normal ship would have been vaporized, but Amy activated the adaptive hull. The titanium alloy flowed like mercury, redistributing its mass to create dense barriers exactly where impacts would occur. Energy beams had reinforced sections and scattered harmlessly. Missiles detonated against armor that was 3 times thicker than it should be. Valiant emerged from the firestorm completely undamaged, quantum drive ready. Amy announced, "Do it." Daniel ordered. Jack activated the experimental jump system, and reality seemed to bend around the Valiant. The ship didn't just move. It existed in 5 places simultaneously. Each position was solid enough to register on sensors. Each one drew enemy fire, but none of them could be hit. The Zathran cruisers fired frantically at targets that flickered in and out of existence. Their weapons struck nothing but empty space, while the Valiant's return fire was devastatingly precise. 3 more cruisers went dark, their engines destroyed by pinpoint strikes. The main Zathran fleet detected the battle and accelerated forward. Admiral Krevos couldn't believe the reports he was receiving. 1 ship, 1 primitive human vessel had crippled 9 of his heavy cruisers in under 2 minutes. "Launch all fighters," he roared. "I want that ship overwhelmed and destroyed." Over 300 Zathran fighters poured from their carriers like a swarm of metallic locusts. They were small, fast, and designed to saturate an enemy's defenses through sheer numbers. Jack saw them coming and smiled. "Amy, how many point defense nodes can the hull generate?" She checked her systems. "As many as we need. The adaptive matrix is still learning." "Then let's teach it something new." The Valiant's hull rippled like water. Hundreds of small turrets emerged from the surface, each one controlled by Atlas with inhuman precision. Fighters closed to weapons range and opened fire. Their energy bolts and missiles filled the space between fleets, but the Valiant's point defense network was everywhere. Every incoming shot was met with countermeasure fire. Missiles exploded before reaching their target. Energy beams were deflected by precisely angled armor plates that appeared and disappeared in microseconds. Not a single shot reached the hull. Meanwhile, the Valiant's return fire cut through the fighter formation like a scythe through wheat. Atlas calculated trajectories faster than any organic mind could process. Every shot hit a critical system, an engine, a weapon mount, a cockpit. Fighters died by the dozens, their wreckage adding to the debris field in 90 seconds. Half the Zathran fighter wing was destroyed. The survivors broke formation and fled back toward their carriers. "Jack, the command ships, where are they?" Daniel asked his tactical officer. Highlighted 4 vessels in the enemy formation. They were larger than cruisers but smaller than dreadnoughts, bristling with communication arrays. "Those are fleet coordination nodes. Take them out and the Zathran lose their tactical cohesion." Atlas. "New targeting priority command vessels only." The AI responded instantly. Acknowledged. Calculating attack vectors. The Valiant moved through the nebula like a predator, using the interference to mask its approach. The quantum drive created displacement fields that made tracking impossible. One moment the ship was on the left flank, the next it appeared behind the enemy formation, each time it emerged from a jump. The Valiant's weapons were already firing. The first command ship never saw the attack coming. Particle accelerators punched through its shields and vaporized its bridge. The second ship tried to activate emergency protocols, but Jack had anticipated that. He launched kinetic penetrators that struck the ship's power core with surgical precision. The explosion lit up the nebula like a miniature star. Third and fourth command ships attempted to retreat behind their dreadnought escorts, but the Valiant was already there. Having jumped ahead of their flight path, Jack's fingers danced across his console. Amy, I need everything the quantum drive can give us. We're going for the big ones. Admiral Krevos watched his fleet's coordination collapse, and real-time reports flooded his bridge cruisers destroyed, fighters decimated, command ships eliminated, and through it all, that single human vessel moved like nothing he had ever seen. It wasn't just fast or well-armed, it fought with an intelligence and adaptability that seemed impossible. All dreadnoughts, target that ship, he commanded, his voice breaking with rage and fear. I don't care what it takes. Destroy it. The 5 massive dreadnoughts turned to face the Valiant. Their weapons were designed to crack planets. Their shields could withstand sustained bombardment from entire fleets. They were the pride of the Zathran Empire, and they were about to learn that humanity's prototype was more than they could imagine. Daniel watched the dreadnoughts charge their weapons and felt his crew's tension through the neural link. The 5 Zathran dreadnoughts moved into attack formation with the confidence of predators that had never known defeat. Vessels stretched over 2 kilometers long, their hulls covered in armor plating thick enough to stop a meteor strike. Weapons arrays lined their surfaces like the scales of ancient dragons against any conventional opponent. They were unstoppable. The USS Valiant looked like a minnow facing sharks. Captain Daniel Carter felt the weight of what they were attempting through the neural link. He sensed his crew's fear mixing with determination. Dr. Lisa Morgan's voice came through his earpiece, tight with concern. Captain, neural stress levels are approaching critical thresholds. The interface wasn't designed for this kind of sustained combat. Daniel checked the biometric displays and saw what she meant. Every crew member's brain activity showed patterns that indicated extreme mental strain, headaches, disorientation, even minor hallucinations were becoming common. How long can they hold? He asked. Minutes, not hours. If we push much further, we risk permanent neurological damage. Daniel made a decision that felt like tearing out his own heart. All non-essential personnel, evacuate to emergency pods immediately. The bridge went silent. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez turned from her console with shock on her face. Daniel, you can't. That's an order. Amy, we need to reduce crew to absolute minimum for what comes next. Commander Jack Bennett understood. First, you're going to activate the Cascade Protocol. Daniel nodded. The Cascade Protocol was theoretical, a way to push the quantum drive beyond its design specifications. It would let them create displacement fields strong enough to redirect incoming energy. Not just move the ship, but the power requirements were astronomical. They would need to route everything through the neural interface, which meant fewer people sharing a much greater load. 20 crew members, Daniel said. That's the minimum to operate combat systems. Everyone else goes to the pods now. Amy stood and faced him directly. I'm staying. You'll need engineering support. Amy, don't argue with me. Captain, besides, someone needs to keep the ship from tearing itself apart when you try this insane maneuver. Jack was already selecting the essential crew. Tactical needs 5. Engineering needs 6. Medical needs 2. Command needs 3. Navigation needs 4. That's 20. The rest of the crew began moving toward the emergency pod base. Some looked relieved. Others looked ashamed to be leaving a young ensign named Kevin Barnes stopped at the bridge entrance. "Captain, I just want you to know we believe in you. Get to safety." "Kevin, that's how you help us now." The pods launched, carrying 20 crew members away from the coming battle. They would drift through the nebula, hopefully unnoticed by Zathran sensors, until rescue arrived, if rescue ever came on the bridge. The remaining crew strapped back into their neural interface stations. Lisa watched their readings spike as they took on the full burden of controlling the ship. "Neural load redistributing," she reported, her voice strained. "It's within tolerance, but barely." The dreadnoughts finished their attack preparation, their weapons charged with power that made the surrounding space distort from the energy. Build-up Admiral Krevos broadcast one final message. His face twisted with rage. "You have destroyed my vanguard and humiliated the Zathran Empire for that. Your species will suffer for generations. When I'm done with your ship, I will personally oversee the destruction of every human colony. I will make Earthwatch as their children burn." The transmission cut off. Daniel felt cold rage settle over him. This wasn't just about defending humanity anymore. This was about stopping a monster who threatened innocence. "Jack, execute Cascade Protocol on my mark." His tactical officer's hands moved across the controls. Cascade sequence initialized quantum drive at 200% capacity and climbing. Amy's console lit up with warning indicators. "Captain, the power surge is beyond anything the ship was designed to handle. We might tear ourselves apart. Hold it together." "Amy, I trust you." The dreadnoughts fired it. Wasn't a salvo or a barrage. It was a wall of destruction enough. Energy to vaporize a small moon converged on the Valiant's position. There was no dodging, no outrunning, no surviving, not by conventional means. Now, Daniel shouted. Jack activated the Cascade Protocol. Quantum drive didn't just move the ship this time. Created a bubble of displaced space-time around the Valiant. When the dreadnought's weapons hit that bubble, reality itself rejected them. Energy beams bent and curved back toward their sources. Missiles entered the displacement field and emerged traveling in reverse. The Zathran had created the perfect trap, and they had caught themselves in it. 3 dreadnoughts took the full force of their own weapons, their shields, designed to protect against external threats, offered no defense against attacks from within. The first dreadnought's reactor went critical and exploded with enough force to damage its 2 nearest sister ships. The second lost all power, its systems fried by the feedback from its own particle beams. The third simply broke apart, its structure unable to withstand the stress of redirected kinetic weapons. The 2 surviving dreadnoughts tried to power down their weapons, but Jack had anticipated that the moment their shields dropped for the emergency shutdown, he launched a spread of kinetic penetrators. The projectiles were simple chunks of dense metal accelerated to relativistic speeds. They didn't need to be fancy against unshielded targets. They were unstoppable. Both dreadnoughts took critical hits to their power cores. One managed a controlled shutdown, the other detonated, adding to the expanding debris field in less than 5 minutes. The Zathran Empire's most powerful warships were gone, destroyed not by superior firepower but by their own arrogance turned against them on the bridge of his flagship. Admiral Krevos stared at the tactical display with an expression that cycled through disbelief, rage, and finally fear. He had commanded fleets for 40 years, had conquered 17 star systems. He had never lost a battle until today. His communications officer spoke hesitantly. "Admiral, the fleet is requesting orders. Should we continue the attack?" Krevos looked at what remained of his armada. 50 warships destroyed, outright 2 dreadnoughts disabled, the rest scattered and demoralized against 1 ship, 1 human prototype. that his empire had mocked signal retreat, he said. The words tasting like ash, Admiral? His officer asked in shock. I said retreat. Krevos roared. Pull back to the outer marker and negative. Daniel Carter's voice came through on an open channel. You don't get to run, Admiral. The Valiant appeared on the flagship's forward sensors, looking battered but intact. You destroyed Epsilon Station, Daniel continued, his voice cold as the void between stars. 8,000 people who never threatened you, families, children, civilians. You broadcast their deaths to terrorize us. Now you're going to answer for that. Krevos felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Genuine fear. Captain Carter. I offer surrender. My fleet will leave human space immediately and never return. I accept your surrender, Daniel said. And Krevos felt relief for exactly 2 seconds. But surrender comes with terms. Name them. You will face trial at the Galactic Council for war crimes against civilian populations. Krevos' scales went pale. A trial meant humiliation, imprisonment, possibly execution. The Zathran Empire will pay reparations to the families of every person killed at Epsilon Station. And you will formally acknowledge Earth is a sovereign military power with full protection under galactic law. The Admiral looked at his tactical display, at the wreckage of his fleet, at the single ship that had destroyed everything. He had no leverage, no options, no way out. I accept your terms, he said quietly. Say it for the record. Admiral broadcast on all channels. Krevos activated the fleet-wide communication. His voice, once so confident and cruel, now sounded broken. This is Admiral Krevos of the Zathran Empire. I hereby surrender my fleet to Captain Daniel Carter of Earth. I acknowledge responsibility for the destruction of Epsilon Station and agree to face trial for war crimes. I recognize Earth as a sovereign military power and agree to all stated terms of surrender. The broadcast ended across the galaxy. Species that had watched humanity's humiliation at the Galactic Council now watched the Zathran Empire's defeat. The reversal was so complete, so absolute, that many refused to believe it at first. One ship defeating an armada seemed impossible, but the sensor data didn't lie. The wreckage didn't lie. Admiral Krevos' broken voice didn't lie on the Valiant's bridge. Amy Rodriguez collapsed in her chair as the adrenaline finally wore off. We did it, she said, her voice barely a whisper. We actually did it. Jack Bennett was already calculating the logistics of escorting the surrendered fleet. Lisa Morgan was administering neural stabilizers to crew members showing signs of strain. Daniel sat in his captain's chair and felt the weight of what they had accomplished. They had proven that humanity belonged among the stars, but more than that, they had shown the galaxy that mercy and justice could coexist with strength. Signal Admiral Hayes, he ordered. Tell her the threat is neutralized and we're bringing prisoners for trial. Aye. Captain, the Valiant began the long journey back to human space, escorting what remained of the Zathran fleet behind them. The Calaris expanse slowly absorbed the debris of the battle within days. Scavengers would arrive to pick through the wreckage. They would find pieces of dreadnoughts and cruisers. They would analyze the damage patterns and try to understand how one small ship had done this, and they would spread the story across every world. 3 weeks after the battle in the Calaris expanse, the Galactic Council chamber on Vex Prime Station looked the same as before, but everything else had changed. Captain Daniel Carter walked through the same entrance he had used during humanity's first appearance. But this time, the delegates didn't bluff. They stood. Every species in the chamber rose as the human delegation entered. Admiral Patricia Hayes led the group. Her uniform crisp and her bearing proud. Behind her came Daniel, Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, Commander Jack Bennett, and a dozen other representatives from Earth's government and military. The Silence in the chamber felt heavy with significance. Ambassador Lyra Vex, who had mocked humanity's technology just weeks ago, stepped forward. Her forearms were spread in a gesture of respect. "Captain Carter," she said, her voice carrying through the chamber, "on behalf of the Confederation, I offer formal apology for our previous dismissal of humanity's capabilities." She bowed deeply. "We were arrogant and blind. You have taught us humility." Other delegates echoed her sentiment. Species from across the galaxy competed to offer trade agreements, technology exchanges, and military alliances. The Cortham Assembly, whose representative had laughed at the Valiant's armor specifications, now requested detailed briefings on adaptive hull technology. The Vrin Collective offered to share their advanced manufacturing techniques in exchange for Earth's tactical doctrines. Admiral Krevos was brought into the chamber, and restraints. The once proud commander looked diminished somehow, his scales dull and his posture defeated. He couldn't meet Daniel's eyes. The council had spent 2 weeks reviewing evidence of Zathran War crimes. Epsilon Station was just the beginning. Records showed 17 other species had suffered similar attacks over the past century. Colonies destroyed, civilians massacred, all to enforce the Empire's dominance. The council president, a massive being whose species evolved in a gas giant's atmosphere, addressed the chamber. "Admiral Krevos, you stand accused of systematic violations of the Galactic Conventions on Warfare. The evidence against you is overwhelming. How do you plead?" Krevos's voice was barely audible. "Guilty." The chamber erupted in whispered conversations. "Guilty." Pleas were rare in council proceedings. Most accused war criminals fought the charges until the end. The council will determine sentencing after deliberation. The president continued, "But know this, Admiral, your actions have consequences beyond your own fate." The president turned to address the full assembly. "The Zathran Empire's attack on Epsilon Station and Captain Carter's response have revealed failures in our galactic governance. We claim to be civilized, yet we allowed a predatory empire to terrorize developing species for generations. We mock those we deem primitive, yet humanity has shown innovation beyond our own." Daniel felt the weight of every eye in the chamber on him. The president gestured for him to approach the central platform. "Captain Carter, please address the council." Daniel walked to the speaker's position, the same spot where he had been humiliated before. He carried no notes, no prepared speech. "Members of the council," he began, "Earth didn't come here seeking revenge or dominance. We came seeking recognition as equals." He gestured to the displays that still showed footage from the battle. "What happened in the Calaris Expanse wasn't inevitable, Admiral. Krevos chose to attack civilians. He chose to broadcast their deaths as intimidation. And when faced with resistance, he chose to continue fighting rather than seek peace. Those were his choices, not ours." Daniel paused, making sure his next words carried the weight he intended. "But the council shares responsibility." Shocked murmurs rippled through the chamber. "You created an environment where species like the Zathran felt entitled to destroy those weaker than themselves. You judge civilizations by their weapons output rather than their character. You laughed at our prototype while ignoring the innovation it represented. That has to change." Ambassador Vex spoke up. "What do you propose, Captain?" "New laws," Daniel said simply. "Protections for developing civilizations against military aggression from advanced species. Strict penalties for attacks on civilian populations. And a council enforcement mechanism that can respond to violations quickly, not after thousands have died." The chamber fell silent. What Daniel proposed would fundamentally reshape galactic politics. The council president leaned forward. "You ask us to limit our own power to protect species we once considered beneath notice. I'm asking you to live up to the principles you claim to represent, Daniel replied. Justice, civilization, advancement. Those words mean nothing if they only apply to the strong. Debate filled the chamber for hours. Some delegates argued that Earth was overreaching, that one battle didn't give humanity the right to dictate policy. Others pointed out that if they rejected Daniel's proposals, they would prove his point about the Council's moral bankruptcy finally. Ambassador Vex called for a vote. I propose we establish the Sentinel protocols as Captain Carter has outlined, she announced, with Earth granted a permanent seat on the Enforcement Council. The vote took an hour as each species consulted with their home governments when the results appeared on the main display. Daniel felt something break inside him, not despair, but relief. 37 species voted in favor, only 3 opposed. The Galactic Council had just granted humanity more than recognition they had given Earth a voice in shaping the galaxy's future. The chamber erupted in a mix of applause and continued debate, but Daniel's attention was on Krevos, who watched the proceedings with an expression of bitter understanding. The Admiral had intended to teach humanity its place instead. He had elevated them to a position of leadership after the session ended. Daniel found himself in a quiet corridor with Admiral Hayes. She looked at him with pride and concern mixed together. You know this means Earth can't go back to being a minor player, she said. We'll have responsibilities, now expectations to uphold. Good, Daniel replied. We're ready for that, are we? The Valiant won one battle, Daniel. We can't count on miracles every time. It wasn't a miracle, Admiral. It was preparation, innovation, and people willing to risk everything for what they believed in. Hayes smiled slightly. When did you become a philosopher? When I had to convince a galaxy that we deserved respect. They walked toward the docking bay where humanity's ships waited. The delegation would return to Earth as heroes, but also as architects of a new galactic ordering. The hangar, the USS Valiant, sat surrounded by technicians and engineers from a dozen species. They crawled over the ship like curious children, examining every system with fascination. Amy Rodriguez stood guard over her engine room, making sure no one touched anything without permission. Jack Bennett was in the middle of a crowd of tactical officers, explaining the battle in detail while carefully avoiding any mention of classified systems. Dr. Lisa Morgan supervised the transfer of medical data to other species. Physicians, sharing what they had learned about neural interface technology. Daniel approached the Valiant and ran his hand along its hull. The ship that had changed everything. The prototype that proved innovation mattered more than raw power. An engineer from the Vring Collective approached him nervously. Captain Carter, if I may ask, how did you know the Cascade Protocol would work? Daniel smiled. I didn't. We tested it in combat for the first time during the battle. The engineer's eyes widened. But the risk. If it had failed, we would have died, Daniel said simply. But we believed in our technology and in each other. That's the human advantage. We're willing to try the impossible. Word of that conversation spread through the engineering community within hours. Humanity's reputation for reckless courage was born over the next few days. Daniel received offers from military academies across the galaxy, requesting him as a guest lecturer. Corporations wanted to license adaptive hull technology. Governments wanted to form defense alliances. He turned down most of them. Earth Command offered him a promotion to admiral and a position overseeing humanity's expanding fleet. He declined that too. With respect, Admiral Hayes, my place is on the Valiant, he explained during their final meeting on Vex Prime. The galaxy needs to see that we're not just warriors, we're explorers, diplomats, scientists. One ship proved we deserve respect. Now we need to prove we deserve trust. Hayes understood. She promoted Amy Rodriguez to the rank of commander, and assigned her to develop the next generation of Earth. Warships Jack Bennett received his own command, leading humanity's first fast response task force, LISA. Morgan was recruited to establish a medical research facility focused on human-alien physiological differences, but Daniel stayed. With the Valiant, the ship received upgrades and repairs, incorporating lessons learned from the battle. Its crew expanded to 60, including volunteers from 3 other species who wanted to serve alongside humans on the day they departed Vex Prime. Daniel stood in the observation deck, watching the station recede into the distance. Amy joined him, looking out at the stars. "Do you think they'll really change?" she asked. "The Council, will they actually protect weaker species now?" "Some will," Daniel said. "Others will resist, but we started something here. We showed the galaxy that doing the right thing matters more than doing the easy thing." The Valiant jumped to faster than light speed. Heading toward the frontier, their new mission was simple: explore uncharted regions, make contact with developing civilizations, and ensure that what happened to Epsilon